Good morning, Rock. I'm been super excited to welcome you to Love First Aid. Gratitude in advance. But how's your weekend going?
So far so good, and I'm equally excited to be here. Obviously, like I've been thinking about as soon as you asked me to come on and do the show, I was like, heck yeah, I'm here. Let's do it. Obviously, you and I are very close in terms of mindset and how we think about things. So I think this is going to be a really good chat.
I think it's going to be a good chat in advance. So, for those that are listening, Rock has no context in terms of what we're going to be chatting about this morning because it's fun and why not? So,
Yep.
I have thought of a couple of questions and we're going to go rapid fire. Rock is one of the most talented coaches that I've had the blessing of being able to work with over the past year. Obviously, as coaches, our scope of work is life, but in this container, it's a lot of healing of relationships. So,
Mm.
Rock, this morning in preparation for our chat, I Googled the most current divorce rate. There's lots of numbers that came up, but the kind of most common number that came up on the first page of Google, the average divorce rate in the United States for first marriages is 50%.
Mm.
So 50% of people that say I do at some point in that season or whatever season choose to say I don't.
Yeah.
You've had the blessing of coaching hundreds of men and thousands of people.
Hmm.
I have the Google answer, which I kind of vibe with, but I'm just curious. In your experience, given it's 50%, what's the number one thing that causes people to say I don't?
Oh my gosh, that's such a loaded question. I
I
could
know it
answer it in
is.
so many so many ways, but really, and I'm going to start with this: that I saw an emergence of this during COVID,
Yeah.
and so it just sort of exacerbated a lot of other problems that people already had within their relationships. But foundationally, what I have seen over the last 11 years, and um, it's been sort of confirmed over time, is like what happens is a lot of people go through life living in alignment with needs, the stuff that they need, right? And they're deep and it's driving their behavior in ways that they're not even conscious of. So what happens is like these two people meet and they both have mega needs that need to be met and they probably have needed them for a long time. They see this other person and that person meets that need. And it's a mutual thing. And so they're like, oh my gosh, this is so magical. This is the best relationship I've ever had. I'm so excited about this. And then they go forward in their relationship, they get married, they have kids, they move, they change jobs, family members pass away. There's so many things that happens in life, and what they end up finding is that there's a facade they've been living in alignment with, which is this need, or there are these needs.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, and I'm sure you've seen this too, we'll get men or women that come to us and say, I don't know what we're doing. Like, I don't even know what we have in common. I don't see what our shared values are. And it's like, well, because life has happened and you're not paying attention, your needs have changed. Each of your needs have changed, and you no longer have that foundation that you built your relationship on. And this
Hang
isn't an
on,
impossible.
really
Yeah,
quick. So I know what needs are because we're coaches
yeah,
and we know. Give us some examples. Like when you say needs, you meet and it sounds like this other person is that missing piece and everything.
yeah.
When you say needs, just throw out some examples of what that means.
Oh my gosh, I mean, needs could be literally anything, but a big one we see is validation, right? I need somebody to validate that I'm a worthy person or that I'm worth love or that I'm lovable. Or,
Yeah.
a lot of men lament that they don't get enough physical intimacy. So they find a woman
Yes.
who's like very physical and they're like, oh, this is the best. And it's not a bad thing. Like that and it's by itself is not a bad thing. But when you base the foundations of your relationship on this stuff and they change, I mean, as you get older, your libido drops and all this other stuff. You have kids and it just like puts a damper on a lot of things.
Life
Yeah, right.
happens.
Yeah, and it's like if you don't, if that's what you're focused on and that's what your need was, and then it changes, it's really tough. So there's validation, there's worthiness, there's sometimes just even attention. Like, is somebody looking at me and showing me that I have a place in their life? I need to feel prioritized. I need to feel seen. There's a need for money. Sometimes you get into relationships because the other person is very affluent or successful, and so you're
Oof.
like, oh, they have everything that I need, and it's like, well, maybe not everything. They have one major thing, but not all of them. So yeah, needs run the gamut, and it's really easy for needs and values to get confused, and that's where I front load my relationship with my clients is we need to identify what your actual core values are, not what the needs are. And that way we can get really clear on like what's kind of guiding them through life and their behaviors and all this other stuff. And
Yeah, hang on.
it's
Examples of what values could mean.
okay. So a lot of people will say, I'll say, tell me what your values are. And they're like, honesty, family, love,
Integrity,
yeah,
loyalty.
integrity. And I'm like, okay, but what do those things mean? Like, what about family do you value? Right. And they're like, well, I really like being connected and I really like support and I really like this stuff. And I'm like, okay, so if you didn't have any of those things, would you still be happy? And
Mm.
they're like, oh, no. And I'm like, then those are needs, they're not values. And it's a big kind of reveal. So, values are the things that make us who we are, and they haven't changed from when we were kids. So I often will ask my clients first question about values is, if you were 7 years old and you woke up on a Saturday morning, you had no responsibilities, nobody tell you what to do, what's the first thing you would do? And you get a lot of like pauses and thinking. It's like, what did I
I
do?
just did the same thing.
Yeah, your face, like you were just like, huh. Well, I get a lot like, oh, I go outside and like explore my neighborhood or the woods. And it's like, when was the last time you explored the woods as an adult? Oh, I don't have time for that. Okay, well, maybe you should make some time because there's a value you're not honoring there, you know?
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a really good pause and like a introspective question that anyone listening should sit with for a second. When's
Yeah,
the last time
absolutely.
you did that thing that if you had no responsibilities, you had a yes day or a free day, what would you do? And when's
Hmm.
the last time you did it? I hear a lot of excuses. Do you hear a lot of excuses? Oh, I'm too busy.
Oh yeah, it's very easy. You always find reasons why you can't do something.
Yeah. So when
So
all of those things are in alignment,
yeah.
what do you see when all of those things are sort of in alignment? How does that manifest in a relationship?
Yeah, I mean, your original question was, what contributes to that 50% divorce rate? And I say
Yeah.
it's because the needs dissolve or they change and people don't know who they are with each other and all of that. But
Yeah.
what really kind of changes this is when you have an individual or a couple who both do the work in identifying what their values are and they're able to express what the value looks like when it's being honored. It
Yeah.
gives the other an opportunity to meet a new standard and it changes
Yeah.
the dynamic of the relationship. And like you'll see this, and I mean, this at firsthand. Sometimes you have to split and go away from the person to really get in touch with yourself. But once you each do that work, you can actually find that shared value and come back together. So separation is not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it's a very good thing. And so people get very scared of thinking about this because in their minds, they have a fixed mindset about what it means to be separated. They think once you separate, that's the end of it. And it's like, no, that's just the first step. There's so many things that follow that, you know?
Totally. I hear that with men and women consistently. That's the number one word that people receive wrong when it's said out loud. It's the word space. So
Mm,
separation, space. Um, I march to my own beat. I love the idea of space, depending on a unique situation. But like, I went to my ranch house this weekend. My husband kicked me out of my house and said, "You clearly need a minute." I had no
mhm,
phone, there's no internet hooked up. And I came back with a totally different perspective. I think a lot of times, men, not for anything, men hear the word, I need a break, I need space. And they're like, oh my God, it's over. And it's just that they're missing each other by just a hair.
mhm.
I think I see that in practice on a daily basis.
Yeah,
That
absolutely. And
that minute to really refresh and know who you are so
yeah.
that that relationship can thrive.
Well, what you just said is really important too. I mean, your husband recognized that you needed the space. That's something that is integral to you. And he
Yeah.
actually honored your value in that moment because you've had a conversation and a real open, honest, sort of come to Jesus about like, what are my values and what are the needs? And now your partner is actually able to step up for you and you're giving him the opportunity. And it's mutual. Like I'm sure he's done the same with you. So communication is often like so underrated in terms of what it can do for a relationship. And it's like, oh yeah, we talk a lot. And it's like, yeah, but what do you talk about? Like
How is
how
your day? Who's picking up the children? Did you pay the
yeah,
electric bill? Um,
logistics. Hmm.
Transactional. All right.
Yeah.
Let me kind of bring it back to the second part of the initial question that I asked.
Yeah.
So we're going with top couple answers on a search engine, but the number one reason reported for the 50% divorce rate of first marriages
Hmm.
was commitment.
Hmm. Such a broad word.
It's a very broad word, but given that
Mm.
you've coached like thousands of hours, how does that land for you? The 50% divorce rate in the United States comes down to lack of commitment.
Mm. Well, you know what's interesting is when you said that word, my first thought was not like affairs. That wasn't the first
Yep.
thing that came to my mind. It was commitment in terms of like, do they feel like you're tied into the relationship? And so that's what I think about commitment. I don't think about people stepping out. I think about people
Yeah.
feeling emotionally detached from
Yep.
the relationship. And so, not a surprise to me. I mean, we work with a lot of men, and unfortunately for us, we're not like naturally emotional creatures. So, unless you do the work to really build that skill, it's going to be hard for you. But I think that most women, I've heard, especially in couples coaching, is like, I don't feel like my husband connects with me. And like, this kind of ties back to what I said before is that your husband is living in alignment with his needs, and he's actually putting a wall up between him and you because there's something there that he's not fully integrating and being authentic about. So you guys, women, have this like sixth sense ESP about like this disconnection, this wall, and you
It's
don't know
called
exactly.
intuition.
Intuition, absolutely. I mean, we all have it, but you guys like really have it. So
We
I
really
mean,
do.
it's so interesting because like you can sense that something is missing, but your brain just does the job of trying to fill in what that is. And so you start to
Yep.
make assumptions based off of like your current experience in your relationship about what is happening. And it may not be, but because we're not talking to you, we're not telling you what's on our minds or why we're disconnecting or why we're trying to protect ourselves or whatever,
Yeah.
you fill in the gap with what you need. And this goes both ways. This isn't just like a woman problem. I just want to make sure that I'm clear about this. This is
Totally.
like a very mutually problematic thing for both sexes. But yeah, it's not surprising that commitment is the number one reason. And I think commitment really ties into that emotional connection in the relationship.
Yeah. So can I just share what came through for me when I saw that? Because
Yeah,
it
please.
was totally unexpected.
Yeah.
I also didn't go to commitment, like commitment to each other, like in terms of like somebody stepping out or an emotional or physical. Because we hear that all day, every day.
Yeah.
Somebody, been involved with someone else. When I saw the word commitment, I think it ties in really nicely where it's really complementary to where you were going earlier. The way that I read that, like my gut reaction was commitment to self.
Mm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
you said, you know what, you have this honeymoon season and everybody's needs are met and the values feel aligned. And then what happens? You get married. We say you buy a house. Now you've got more bills. And then you pop out some children, amazing blessings. And now
Mm-hmm.
you've got to work. Men do this a lot. They prioritize providing. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing all these things. Why can't you be happy? And then
Mm.
it's that question of being seven. When's the
Mm-hmm.
last time you took that minute to sit with yourself and say, what fulfills me? Men do the providing thing. And in my experience, because I have thousands of hours with women, less with men, it's that loss of sense of self.
Yeah.
Like we give and give and give to meet someone else's needs when our cup is empty. So
Mm-hmm.
when I saw that, I said, okay, what's the root of that? Commitment being the top kind of broad reason.
Yeah.
And I think it's the commitment to self, to that self growth, to maintaining who you are, to filling your own cup. And that's what I
Mm-hmm.
hear with women. Like I gave
Mm.
everything, I was screaming for help, and I said all these things for years, and he didn't hear me. And then when you step back, like you've done couples coaching, it's like, how can two people with a shared experience, they have shared values, they have children, how can their experience be so
So
different?
different. Mm-hmm.
And then he comes back to communication. How is your day? Who's picking up this kid? Did the dog go to the groomer?
Mm-hmm.
And that loss of sense of self and then communication, I would
Mm-hmm.
have guessed with that the divorce rate would be higher.
Yeah. Well, what you're saying is like so true. And, when you think about loss of sense of self, I often think too, this comes back to the idea that self doesn't change, right?
Mm,
And couples get into a relationship in their current state, and there's a fixed mindset of like, okay, this is always going to be what it's like. And if
mhm.
you don't believe that you can grow together and you adjust to what life brings you, there's going to be a big, moment in the relationship that it kind of crumbles. And as soon
Yeah.
as you adopt the belief that you can be different and your spouse can be different and you can love them in this new version of themselves, until you do that, it's gonna be a rough ride because we're
Yeah.
humans and humans are not they're not pretty, they're not perfect, they're not black and white. There's a lot of gray and there's a lot of inconsistency, and
Mhm.
emotions plays a big part in all of this as well. So if you're not good with that, if you're not comfortable with that, it's definitely going to cause some problems, and not just in your romantic relationship with your significant other, but you're going to see this ripple out at work with your kids, with your friends. Like it's a very widespread thing when you aren't you don't have that growth mindset about people changing.
Totally.
Yeah.
So at Love First Aid, yes, we talk about real things. Like anybody that's married, anybody that's been in a relationship can probably vibe with most of this. Like, oh yeah, we stopped communicating, or my
Hmm.
husband was always at work, or my wife was too busy taking care of the kids.
Hmm.
But my favorite part of what we get to do here is talking about creating that positive change, right? So you've had incredible experience with just just this huge array of people, from like, our normal people, like people next door, all the way through people that would be very, it's like the nice way of saying that, recognizable, like
Yeah.
public, like they would be like if I said the name, people would
Prominent.
be like, Rock is fancy. So humans are
Yeah.
humans, regardless of what's in the bank account. And, if
Right.
I said the name, people would be like, oh, holy ish, look at that.
Mm.
For those that are listening who are wanting to, to really lean into your wisdom,
Mm.
what's the number one thing you would share in how to maintain a healthy relationship?
Hmm.
You're
Number
married.
one. Yeah, number one thing. Okay, for my own perspective, number one,
Yeah.
you have to do the work on yourself before you meet your soulmate. This was just what happened to me. I had to go through a lot of really rocky relationships, no pun intended, really rough relationships. And I had a really high sense of judgment for myself and for the people that I was in relationships with. And it was causing a huge problem. I had it since I was a young kid, result of parenthood. We don't have time for all of that story, but basically you have to do that work to kind of like identify who you are and why that is. And
Yeah.
the next jump to that is when you're able to identify the identity that you are stuck in. So that when you have problems, that there's an identity that you have that is rejecting your current reality, right? And so you have to first identify where you're stuck, who that person is, what they believe about themselves and about
Mhm.
life and about relationships. That will feed into your thoughts and emotions about how these things happen. Those
Yeah.
thoughts and emotion create your actions, and then you have a reality. And so if you want your relationship to work, if there's problems in your relationship, you have to check with yourself and your significant other. Hopefully there has to be a shared agreement to do this work collectively, but separately.
Yeah.
You need to look at what version of me am I stuck in, and why am I stuck
Yeah.
there? And so until you do that, that stuck identity is going to keep inserting itself. And anytime you try to make a change, like if you try to manifest, or if you try to have positive mindset, it's like you're just trying to install something on top of something that is not ready for that.
Yeah,
So you
it's
have
a
to
surface
tightly,
level.
yeah, you have to entirely clear that identity out and really adopt this new current version of you, and stop rejecting the feelings that go along with that. Stop rejecting the reality of maybe things are really not that good, but that's okay, because there's a huge
Mhm.
opportunity for you to do something about that now because you're aware of it. So if you want your relationship to work, like do the self work, but also don't be afraid to move on from the things that no longer serve you in your life.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. I hear that a lot. I think repeat that last thing. Don't be afraid to move away from things that no longer serve you.
Mm.
What can you release today? If there's something that's coming up and you are like, ugh, I'm still holding on to that, um, release it. It's a
Mm.
conscious decision to say, this no longer serves me. Saying
Mm.
that out loud with that intention, this no longer serves me. So simple, not easy, so simple, so powerful.
Yeah, and it's even deeper than that too. You can say, reflect on when, or what version of me did this serve, and
Yeah.
thank yourself for developing that mechanism to get you to here, where you can actually look back and have an appreciation for all that you've been through, because you developed that one way of living that
Yeah.
no longer is necessary. You've now reached the point where you can let it go, because you have new skills, you have a new
Yep.
support system, you have a new love in your life that can really support you in a fresh and like beautiful way. But it's
Yeah.
really hard for us to let go of the things that are familiar to us, even if they
Yeah.
are shitty. Like even if they're so bad, like it's really hard
Totally.
because we know it and it's familiar, and there's so much things that make us feel unsafe in the world that will cling to anything that gives us consistency, even if it's not a habit that we want, you know?
Gosh, and then you add in like your primordial brain being like, this is awful, but this is like the pain that we know. So when you do
Yeah.
make a change, surface, deep work, your brain's like, stay here where it's shit. Don't
Yeah.
move. So even just the awareness around those things. So I have one more question for you.
Yeah, sure. Lay it on me.
So you have a busy life, massive just responsibilities and a house and a, oh my gosh, gorgeous, amazing wife and the world's most precious daughter. And, of course, you guys are like a catalog, the Goldens, right? So you have a coaching practice, a relationship, you guys have a small child, lots of responsibilities. If
Mhm.
you could share one thing from your personal, your personal life with just thriving and a happy, healthy, well-adjusted marriage, family, rock, baby, what's one thing that you would share that's really helping your marriage thrive?
Mm, my gosh. One thing.
Yeah, whatever.
um,
Don't overthink it like most dudes do. What comes through first, it works for me.
yeah. I would say that we had a really big conversation when we found out we were going to have Perry, my daughter. And we both went into it saying, we don't know what we're in for.
Yeah.
There's so much unknown about what's going to come next in our lives. And we both kind of looked at ourselves and each other, and we made the agreement then and there that no matter what comes our way, we will navigate it in the way that we need to. We're gonna rise to the occasion. And
Yeah.
I think oftentimes, especially at the juncture of life where you tell people that you're expecting a child, they start throwing advice at you and telling you, oh, it's gonna be so hard, you're never gonna sleep, and like your relationship's gonna suffer, and you guys are gonna argue and blah blah blah. And like we never adopt the things that people put on us. And I
Yes.
love that about my wife, is that she's like me in that way, that we don't care what people tell us how it's going to be. We let it unfold the way that it's going to unfold,
Yeah.
and we allow ourselves to show up in the way that we need to kind of make that happen. And so I would say that there's a shared agreement here that we don't know what life is going to bring, but there is a mutual trust and respect and understanding that no matter what it is, we are going to get through it, and we're going to be better for it because we went through it together. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I can't stress. It's so deep, much deeper than that. I'm even getting like a little like
Yeah.
emotional thinking about that. But like
Totally.
surface level as a takeaway, like I think that's
Good.
what it is. It's like just that you're gonna do it. It's gonna be fine. Everything's gonna be okay.
So quiet the noise, because no matter what in life, the people that love us the most tend to want to support us with their
Advice.
perspective,
Yeah.
opinion. And they're usually coming from love, but that creates so much noise. So what I'm hearing is you're prioritizing your emotional connection and
Hmm.
adopting that mindset of growth. No matter what comes our way, we're going to work through it together.
Absolutely. That's 100% right.
I think that's a beautiful takeaway and a super I could talk to you forever, but a super good place to sort of pause. So one more question. So do you currently, like, do you have room in your practice if someone's hearing you and like, I need more rock in my life? Do you have room? Like, are you accepting new people? Because I know you were waitlisted like last time we chatted. So kind
Yep.
of like if someone wants to get in touch, am I cool to get them in touch with like the links to the bio and all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm very intentional about the clients I take on. Not every person is a good fit for me. I mean, that's why there's millions of coaches across the globe.
Yeah.
But I will always take the time to kind of learn and understand who it is that's sitting in front of me, and if I can be their best support. Something I do want to mention, like you kind of just touched on with the wait list, is I only take on a certain number of clients at one time, because I am a high touch sort of concierge type of coach.
Yes.
Meaning, if you need to call me in the middle of your day, or if you have you send me a text and like, hey, Rock,
Yeah.
I need this, blah, blah, blah. I can get on with you, but I can't do that if I'm serving 50, 60 people at one time, right? So like I'm very
Oh,
intentional about that. And I find that the best transformations happen over a little bit of a longer time span of like 3, 6, 12 months,
yeah.
in that range. 3 to 12 months is really the ideal. But yes, I am accepting new people on a limited basis, obviously pending that we're a good fit and I can help them the
Got it.
best that they need it. But yeah, absolutely. Share what you want to share.
So that's more of just like a bespoke 100% whatever that person is needing, high touch. Um, that's different from a lot of coaches.
Mm,
For people who aren't
yeah.
familiar with coaching, that's really different. I think you and I have both probably at some point had that 50, 60, who am I talking to, pulling up notes.
Oh
And I
yeah.
think we both graduated to where we can really use our zones of genius and really make sure that it's in alignment for everyone. So I'm going to get all your stuff linked.
Sure.
Massive gratitude. I would love to have you back on Love First Aid. I think
Yeah.
your wisdom and perspective is just unmatched when it comes to the relationship space. So, so much gratitude.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I honestly, the honor's all mine to be on your show here on Love First Aid and like be a guest. I think this is fantastic. I love all that you stand for and the mission that you have behind why you're doing what you're doing. I 100% believe in you. I think we're totally aligned in the relationship
Yeah.
space, and I have as much respect for you as you do for me. So thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate that,
Awesome.
Liz.
Well, have a blessed rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. Bye bye.